Hey everyone, welcome to another daily cinephile vlog. Today we're going to talk about Mission Impossible Dark Reckoning Part 1. I've been waiting for 5 years for this movie to come out. Been very excited for this two-part finale. Apparently, we'll see if that ends up being true. But it looks like two-parters are back in style. They were gone for a few years, but they've been coming back with Cross the Spider-Verse and its follow-up, soon to be Beyond the Spider-Verse. We also have Fast X and 11 apparently, that hasn't filmed yet, and Fast 12 because Vin Diesel wants it to be a trilogy. I don't know if that's happening. Let's ignore that one for a second. Mission Impossible Dark Reckoning Part 1. Now, Fallout is one of the best action movies of all time. I've rewatched it several times since 2018. Love that movie. Just great action all around, but also brought a great theme to the Mission Impossible series that's always sort of been there, which is basically Ethan Hunt's attempt to avoid all collateral damage, if possible, and to get rid of the notion of having to sacrifice others for the great of good. I feel like that movie was built around that idea, and it was accomplished very well. Something that's sort of been in the movies the entire time, and Mission Impossible Dark Reckoning, of course, it continues that theme. I don't think this movie is as good as Fallout. It was going to be a hard thing to top. I don't even think the movie's really trying to top that. It's doing its own thing. And, of course, bringing a lot of different action sequences along with it. The villain this time around is Gabriel, which is someone from Ethan's past. It's kind of interesting that we're actually seeing a little bit of more of Ethan prior to the first Mission Impossible movie. And they're trying to connect the dots from where he began in the IMF versus where he is now. But also, there's a different entity out there. That's what they literally call it, the entity. It's this artificial intelligence, or better yet, what I like to call it is just an algorithm. This algorithm can guess everybody's intentions, everybody's movements, and what the next step is going to be. It's kind of an abstract idea, but something that I think a lot of people are very aware of, especially in modern times. It's a creepy idea. There's a sense that some governments maybe are going to use it for good, some governments are going to use it for bad, and some people are going to use it with unintended consequences. The intro, which is just excellent, it takes place on this submarine. It sets you up right away for a movie full of disguises, throwing you off, making you see something that's not there. It causes the team to go on a wild goose chase. Despite the fact that they're all very good at their jobs, which is a big positive with these movies. These characters are excellent at their job. The only time they fail at something is usually due to very human or personal flaws, which have been developed over the past 20 years of this franchise. In fact, it's more like 30 years of this franchise. I forgot the first movie. It came out in 1996. But there's a scene in an airport where one moment we're following someone and we think they're the culprit, but then there's a switch off that occurs. Then we think this other person might be the culprit, but meanwhile, another character Benji realizes that this character that we were following, who may not be the culprit, is associated with a bag that was alerted very quickly to possibly be suspicious, which is going on the same flight as this culprit, who may not actually be the culprit. So meanwhile, they have to go figure out if that bag is anything serious. Meanwhile, they still need to figure out if that guy's even the culprit and who this other person is. And there's a whole lot of that going on. Throughout the entire movie, the team is being chased by the CIA, by the villain, by the villain's henchmen, and it's all being determined by this algorithm that just guesses everything they're going to do before they do it. And that's why the entire time I'm wondering, in what way is Ethan Hunt one step ahead of the algorithm? I'm not quite sure. I think it's a very broad concept, because it's not that the algorithm is forcing everybody to make the choices that they're making. It's more that no one's really able to outsmart this algorithm because it understands human interaction and human personality. In fact, the way that the movie ends with the final climactic battle, which has a great reference to the first movie, as this movie is full of little nods to the first movie. It's almost as if Ethan's trying to go against the team's wishes to possibly outsmart the algorithm. And I don't know, I'm very curious about where this is going to go with the second movie. Of course, this movie is very much contained. I don't think the second movie is going to be necessary in order to enjoy this movie. In fact, I feel like that's what makes this movie a little bit better than Across the Spider-Verse. I really like Across the Spider-Verse, but there are things that happened in that movie that I think could be affected depending on the questions that are asked in that movie and how the second movie decides to answer it. I think it could make the first movie play out a little bit differently on the second watch after the second movie comes out. It all depends what happens. I think the second movie will be great, but in my opinion, Dark Reckoning Part 1 is already incredible on its own. It has more of a finality to it, but there are things that still go unanswered that get you excited for the next one and what they have saved. What haven't they done yet that we're going to get in Part 2? I have always loved Tom Cruise as an actor. I think he's, in a sense, underrated with these action movies because I think there's a sense that he does the stunts, but there's not really much expected out of him as an actor. I think as he's gotten older, he's been very good at being very subtle with his acting. In those moments where he doesn't even really need to say anything. It's all about expression or those facial expressions especially. He's very good at being funny and being charming when necessary. And this movie is no exception, but I also think this is the most intense he's ever gotten and the most stressed he's ever been. It's almost as if even if he does every single thing right and saves the day, he thinks he might lose. And it's a very interesting concept, probably because this time the IMF not only is after him like they usually are, but they already knew ahead of time that he would be a rogue agent. He's gone rogue so many times in the past, either because he has to or because he's being framed. But in this one, it's almost like an uneasy presence when they are giving him the mission. It's almost as if they're asking him to complete this mission, but they already know that he's going to go against their wishes. We might as well send the CIA after him already. And yeah, the movie is riddled with typical action storylines we've seen before and cliches, but it's almost like the movie isn't exactly criticizing them by using this algorithm that's perfectly spelling out what everybody's move is going to be, what everybody would typically do. But it's almost like it's saying this is what's supposed to be done. Of course this is what's supposed to be done. And what are you all going to do differently? You all can't go out of character. It's impossible for you all to do it. You can't help yourselves. I think Christopher McQuarrie, who's taken over the series since Rogue Nation, is just fascinated by these types of villains who kind of write the destinies of these heroes. We got that with Rogue Nation and Fallout, especially in Fallout with that villain and the way that they tried to challenge Ethan on his own objectives. What makes Ethan Hunt any different? Is he any different? And I'm really curious to see what they're going to do in the second movie, because there's something that we probably missed in this movie, but I swear he did something to outsmart everybody, and man, it gets me excited. But rather than talking about all the so-called complexities of the story, which the story is very fun, sometimes you can't keep up, and I think sometimes, especially the heads of the security agencies, they almost talk a little too robotically. That might even be like a creative choice. Maybe they're aligning people who are heads of national security along with those who are robotic in nature already, like AI and algorithms and things like that. There's a lot of conversations where everybody comes to the conclusion before anybody even needs to deliberate about it, because everyone's just that smart. But I also believe that all these characters are that smart. And even though they're that smart, sometimes they are still tricked in the best of ways. The action scenes are so dazzling to look at. There's a great car chase through Rome that I think is also very funny. There's like this little yellow car that they end up driving around, and they're handcuffed and they're driving on the wrong side. So their hands are all crisscrossing like this, and it's just so much fun to watch and very inventive. Like, you just have never seen anything quite like it. Of course, there's the big jump that I think a lot of people already saw on YouTube that they were promoting very heavily. It was a real stunt that Tom Cruise did. It looks incredible in this movie. And the thing that really, I think, brings it all together is the sound effects, especially when they're on that train. The way things just whoosh by, it gets loud and it's scary and it's freaky and it really puts you on the edge of your seat. I must have had a great theater for sound because the sound was good. The music by Lauren Balfe is still incredible. I wasn't a big fan of Michael Giacchino leaving back after he did Ghost Protocol, but Lauren Balfe has been doing great work since Rogue Nation. His last score in Fallout was incredible, and there's just as great of pieces here. It's amazing how many twists they can still do to that Mission Impossible theme, like a theme that comes back from the old TV show. Somehow they find so many cinematic ways to keep upping the ante and somehow making it even more epic. And the movie is like nearly 3 hours, but it does not feel like that at all. At one point I checked my watch when the climax, I could feel that climax coming, and I actually was getting sad. I wasn't checking my watch because I was bored. I was checking it because I was like, no, come on, there's got to be another hour. I don't end yet. I couldn't get enough of this movie, and I'm so happy another one's coming next year already. I think things end on a great note. It leads to a second movie, but this movie can still be watched on its own. It doesn't feel like it's missing an entire half, as a lot of these part ones and part twos often can feel like. Overall, while I don't like it as much as Fallout, it's real close. I'd have to rewatch some of the other movies beforehand, but honestly, I think this might be the second best in the series. And that's saying something because a lot of these movies are incredible. It was also nice, I have to say, to see way more tributes to Brian De Palma's work in the first movie. Not just with that little nod with the train sequence, which was a nod to the first movie, but also with the shooting style. There's a lot of Dutch angles in this one with the conversations. Sometimes it gets almost to be a bit much. I almost wonder, I'm like, okay, I saw what you were doing at first, but now you're almost doing Dutch angles every single time there's a conversation between two characters, and I don't feel like even Brian De Palma did this as much in the first movie. But nonetheless, incredible movie. I'm going to see it again, and it's easily my number one of this year so far. Thanks for watching, everyone.